painting our condo, and every time I pulled the tape, I would get this jagged leakage along the edge of the tape, and it frustrated me. And so I thought, well, this should be easy to fix. I'll just go buy the best tapes I can buy. I'll just buy better tape. And so I went to the Home Depots and the Lowe's, and that's where I really became aware that there were special tapes. I purchased them all, and I have them here, and I tried them, and they didn't work. And quite frankly, I didn't feel they worked any better than the regular inexpensive tapes. And I thought, well, maybe I'm just not applying them correctly. So I was more conscientious, and I cleaned the surfaces, and I just pretty much did everything I could do to make them work right. And the results were still terribly disappointing. And so at the time, I thought, well, this can't be too hard to fix. There has to be a way to seal that edge. And so I thought, well, clearly this is a problem that I've encountered and others have encountered. And so I thought, well, this is kind of what I do. I'm an inventor. I'll just fix this problem and sell some tape. If you analyze why the current tapes don't work, what you finally come to understand is that the gap that's required for a liquid to flow through or into is extremely minute. And the best example I can use is when they take a sample of your blood and they prick your finger and a drop of blood forms, and they take this little pipette, and this pipette has a hole in it that's about 10/1000ths of an inch in diameter. And yet when they touch that pipette to the drop of blood, you see the blood shoot up into the pipette, okay? That's called capillary action. And those forces are very powerful. So when you use a conventional tape on a surface, all it has to have is a 10/1000ths gap anywhere, and that can be just a crack in the paint for the paint to flow into that crack under capillary action. So what we realized was you quite literally couldn't have any gaps at all. You had to have a solid, complete wall as a barrier. And if you go down, when we did this, if you look at it with a microscope or a magnifying glass when tape has been applied, you can see these little tiny gaps that cause the current tapes to fail. And so what we did with SnotTape was we worked at developing this viscoelastic polymer that behaved almost like clay when you pushed it. So as you push it, it flows, again, like a combination of a liquid and a solid. And if you look at it under a microscope, you'll see that there are no gaps for the paint to flow through. And it's getting that adhesive to flow into that gap, stay there long enough so that during the painting process, that gap was blocked, and yet get the adhesive to remove safely afterwards. So it was this delicate balance of properties that were required to actually get it to function in the way that we knew in our minds we wanted. When we think of texture, I think we tend to think of obvious texture, stucco, for instance, or knockdown surfaces, or sand. But those levels of texture, while they cause a lot of problems for the current tapes, are the extreme. The failures that I encountered in my own experience turned out to be on surfaces that I think we would classically call smooth. They were wood surfaces that had been painted. And what was happening was it was the grain in the wood that was providing the leak path. And so you would look at that and say, well, that's not a textured surface, but it is. And so this problem carries itself down into areas where I think the public would not normally consider texture an issue, but it is. the world has tried to get one type of masking tape to work on all surfaces, and I tried two, but I wasn't successful. And so what I learned was the range of adhesion that's out there in people's homes is so extreme that one product couldn't be made to work really well on all surfaces. Within the home, there are I will say at least two levels of adhesion, and we characterize that by energy levels. And this starts to get a little technical, but the simple answer is some surfaces just simply don't want things to stick to them, and some surfaces do. An example of a surface that's high energy, that wants things to stick to it, would be primer. That's primer's job, to get the next layer of paint to stick. There are a lot of surfaces that SnotTape works extremely well on. Sand, eggshell, knockdown, and even mild stucco.